Hello! In this video, I speak with Julie Upton about Section 4 of Mission Action Planning. That's Discipleship and Lights for Christ. So, Julie, if a church thinks that they're at stage 1 and they want to move to stage 2, what do they need to do?
Well, first of all, I think it's for all churches when they're doing mission action planning, they look at the sections and they think, oh my goodness, I'm not doing any of this. So it's very easy for them to give themselves a bad time. But I would say that this first stage is an opportunity to review what they're doing as a church, to review especially the language that they're using. So, for instance, do they use the language of discipleship, or do they always refer to their members as church members? So sometimes that's quite a leap for some churches, changing the language. So I would suggest that they start reviewing all that they do as a church. So maybe looking at their publicity, looking at their notice boards, looking at what they put on their websites, looking at the language, and try to include language of discipleship and being lights for Christ in the world. I'd also maybe suggest that they look at the preaching, whoever's doing the preaching in their church, thinking about what language they use when they're trying to help church members live out their lives as disciples. So using those words, using words that are about engaging with the community, relating their faith to their everyday lives, and maybe also offering a challenge at the end of the sermon to say, you know, what does this mean to you? How this week can you live out this value? I'd also maybe suggest that they look at their children's work. For some churches, they may not have very many children, but nevertheless, what are they doing with their children? How are they talking about discipleship with them? I saw the other day, came across the expression "Diddy disciples." I think that's a wonderful expression. So thinking about what material they use with their children, and maybe offering opportunities for children to engage in discipleship. So for instance, in my church, we used to get the children to make up the flowers on Mothering Sunday, and then to give them out and to learn the names of the church members and to encourage the children to talk to them. So it's not just the adults, it's the children as well, reviewing the language you use, reviewing what you actually do with them. Also, maybe thinking about what learning opportunities do you have in your church? You may be a church that is used to having house groups, so therefore, what material are you using in the house groups? Are you using that language of discipleship? Are you using material that helps our church members think through how they relate their faith to their everyday lives, how they live out their discipleship in their everyday lives? You may be a church that's not used to using house groups, and maybe people don't really want to meet in their home, so therefore you could meet in the church. Again, we couldn't encourage our church members to have house groups, but we did develop 4 all-day learning sessions a year on Sunday. So we would have a shortened service, and then we would stay on, have lunch together, and we would learn together about what it means to be a disciple, what it means to be lights for Christ in the community where we're placed and where we work. So I would suggest that this first stage is all about reviewing, looking at what you're doing and trying to make little changes.
That's really helpful, thank you. So, Julie, how about moving from stage 2 to stage 3? What kind of things does a church need to be thinking about?
Well, I would see this as the developing stage. So at this stage, I would think it would be the PCC, or if they're lucky enough to have focal ministry teams or a mission area leadership team, maybe they could get together and start thinking about ways in which they could incorporate maybe some learning opportunities within the church, looking at how the church engages with the community, looking at updating and ensuring that all their material on the website and their newsletter and maybe blogs, again, reflects this language of discipleship. So For instance, looking at developing learning, we spoke earlier, didn't we, about trying to find appropriate patterns of learning for a particular church. So whether that's weekly, whether it's quarterly, whether it's seasonal, but whatever it is, to try and develop these learning opportunities so that our church members can indeed think and reflect about what it means to be a disciple on a day-to-day basis. Also, I think in this stage, we'd want to be thinking about praying together, how we're praying together, so not just on a Sunday, but whether there's opportunities through the week for church members to join the leadership for morning prayer or evening prayer or compline, depending on whether people work or whether they're available through the day, but encouraging them to pray. And also, I think it's helpful sometimes to think of particular topics to pray for so that people can focus their prayers. And that, again, may be something that somebody's doing through the week, something that they're anxious about, something that they want to ask other people to pray with them about. So that's prayer, that's learning. And also, I know that many people will, in their churches, use this opportunity on a Sunday to ask church members to talk about what they do Monday to Friday. For me, this was quite new when I was in a parish, but when we started to do it and we invited people to talk about their work or talk about what they'd be doing this time the next day, that really made a difference to each member of the church engaging with each other, asking questions, finding out more about what they do. And so that leads again to requests for prayer, so praying for each other. So that's praying, learning, also thinking a little bit about, what does the church do in terms of their weekly activities? Do they run toddler groups? Do they have bereavement support groups? Thinking about, if they don't do these things, and lots of churches don't because they don't have the resources, how they can engage maybe with the community and do some partnership working. So I think this stage is really about how our church members begin to see that they are disciples, they understand what that means, and they recognise that what they're doing on a day-to-day basis is all about living out their lives as disciples.
I see. Okay, so we've thought about reviewing, we've thought about developing discipleship, and now what's next then if we're moving from stage 3 to stage 4?
So this is the stage where we begin to embed everything. So this is the growing bit in my mind, how I see it. And it's where churches begin to, if you like, create those pathways for our disciples, so that we think about maybe running once a year an inquirer's course. It's in the diary, it's there. You may find that nobody's coming along that particular year to engage with it, but it's in the diary. And probably there will be 1 or 2 people, and hopefully there will be 3 or 4 people. So inquirers courses, think about maybe running something every year like SHAPE, which is a course that helps us discover our gifts and explore how we use our gifts. So maybe program that in. Also maybe program in some practical things about trying to help our church members engage with being a welcomer, interceding on a Sunday, reading in church. And so maybe we ought to be thinking about how we run preparation courses for them. Also thinking about the sessions of learning that we're going to run, whether that's in Advent or Lent, or whether, as we said earlier, we decide that we're going to have 4 a year, and we think of some of the big topics in life, like climate change, like justice, but also some of the issues that are more earthed in reality, where people are trying to deal with, how do I pray when I'm busy? How do I relate the Bible to my everyday life? How do I deal with issues of anger and conflict? So thinking about subject matter that's related to people's everyday lives. So this stage is about trying to be very structured about what we do during the year in terms of helping and supporting our church members. And maybe also at this stage we're trying to encourage church members to own their own discipleship. So maybe develop some rule of life, some discipline of patterns of prayer. This is something that they can do together. They can talk with their friends about and find something that's appropriate for them, because we're all very different. So this final stage is the stage where it's structured, it's embedded in the life of the church, and that people know that they've got that support they need in order to be lights for Christ in the communities where they're placed.
Wonderful. So if I'm hearing it right, it sounds like the first thing to do is to review what you're currently doing with discipleship, the language you're using. Then it's all about developing the way that people can learn and have opportunities to grow in their faith. And then it's all about embedding kind of structured discipleship throughout the year, kind of pathways, so that you end up with a whole life discipleship culture, or a Lights for Christ culture within a church.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.